Around the table, there are Michael Christidis, Secretary General of BSEC, Mr. Yurdan Buzhinov, Chairman of the Sofia Security Forum, Velina Chekarova, Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy, and Lachezar Todorov, Bulgarian tourism business stakeholder, who also is together with us. We invited our speakers to speak around 6-7 minutes and then open the floor for discussion. You know the title, it is Tourism and Security. Well, I'm sorry, Tom Jenkins, of course, I'm reading the old version of the program. Tom, excuse me. You will have 1 more minute as a compensation.
Don't punish the audience.
Yeah. So let's start with Ambassador Michael Christidis. He is Secretary General of the Permanent International Secretariat of the Organization of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation, headquartered in Istanbul, Turkey. He served as Greek ambassador to Turkey, to Argentina. Very senior post in the foreign ministry in Athens, but his unforgettable time was as twice diplomat, including ambassador to Bulgaria, where he supported us to join NATO together with our Turkish neighbors. He's a huge traveler in the region. You can frequently see him on his Harley Davidson, and I had the opportunity to ride this motorbike once. Both of us are safe and sound. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Moni. I hope that the people who are in this room will not, let me say, combine this description of my character with the importance of what I have to say here today. Thank you again for inviting me, being in your panel, and of course, given your, let me say, the Atlantic dimension of your past, Mr. Passy, the present also, and the future Atlantic dimension of yourself, I suppose that when you are mentioning security, you mean the security and the stability in the wider term, in the wider sense of this term, in the wider region of the Black Sea, which is the region that interests the organization that I have the honor to represent. As you know, the overall security situation in this area is not exactly very favorable. We have time and again issues that pop up, and all these issues are not only casting their shadow on the efforts to establish an atmosphere and a climate which is conducive to attracting more tourists in the region, but sometimes it can be also the reason of, let me say, more serious conflict situations and disputes. Now, the organization I'm representing is, let me say, focusing its efforts in promoting the economic cooperation among its member states. Let me add here that we have the privilege of having 12 member states, all littoral states of the Black Sea, plus some states from the Balkans and from the Caucasus region. But as you very well know, security and stability have various dimensions. The one is the political, another dimension is the military dimension, but there is also a very distinct economic dimension to security. And there is where our organization comes in order to promote economic cooperation, so as to improve the situation of this economic dimension of security. And this is the added value of our organization. Because whatever the political problems might be around our region, we meet many times during the year, representatives from all our member states, and we concentrate and focus our efforts in promoting concrete projects that are, let us say, for the benefit of all our member states. So in a way, we are a first level confidence-building mechanism, and I believe that for the issue of stability and security, this is a very important value. But of course, apart from this very general security stability issue in the wider region, that we have the so-called asymmetric risks. Let us say security in the region or security risks in a country. And these have usually to do with the threat of terrorism or terrorism itself, as we heard today. It could be pandemic situations, natural disasters, organized crime, and even an unmanaged flow of refugees, as we see is the case in some of our countries or in most of our countries today. So there we have a much more focused job to do as an international organization. And in fact, we try through the relevant working groups of BISEC to address this issue. How do we commonly react to natural disasters? How do we manage them? Because natural disasters do not observe borders. We have floods or fires which cross the border, sometimes more than one or two neighboring states. So we want to have a mechanism in order to be able to, first of all, diminish the risk and also to reassure our people that an intragovernmental, intrastate approach to the issue is taking place. And of course, we have other working groups which are dealing with health pandemics. How do you approach an issue that afflicts more than one state? I don't want to tire you more on that. And I believe I should also say that our cooperation with the World Tourism Organization in how to address these issues is of great importance, because I'm sure you will know that the WTO has very recently established a high-level task force on tourism and security issues. One of its first meetings took place in May last year in Madrid, and some very interesting decisions have been taken. We would like to be able to implement some of these decisions on our regional level by introducing these decisions to our member states with future workshops and seminars that will take place most probably in our headquarters in Istanbul. So there is, and also the W has also established a security line on tourism, which is available for member states of the UNWTO. There is a toolkit which has to do with crisis communications in tourism, which is accessible with the use of a password. We hope that with the cooperation of the WTO, we will be able to help our member states acquire this password in order to use this very important toolkit on crisis communication. And let me end by saying that all these issues are, how can I say, issues that afflict more than one state. And as it has been very often said here, the greatest results are being attained when the efforts to manage these issues are collective efforts, are regional efforts. And in this, with this, I would like to close my brief intervention by saying that the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization is at the disposal not only of its member states, but also of other interested stakeholders as a trusted partner in the region who has experience, the ability, and also the will to deliver on these very important issues that can be influencing very negatively the tourist flows to our member states. I especially make an appeal, and this might seem very peculiar to you, to our member states, because perhaps one of the biggest problems that afflicts our organization is the lack of communication. Can you imagine, in the 21st century, many of the achievements of the organization do not trickle down to our member states. So please consider this as a plea of greater trust and confidence in the Black Sea Economic Cooperation. And let me thank you again, Mr. Passy, for giving me the opportunity to inform participants on the issues I just mentioned. Thank you.
Very much, Ambassador. Actually, your thoughts brought my thinking to the following conclusion. NATO is in fact a factor of security. Security is a top factor for tourism, so we can regard NATO as a factor for tourism. Now I will pass the word to our next panelist. This is Mr. Iordan Bozhilov. He is the president of Sofia Security Forum, a platform and think tank in the sphere of national and global security, diplomacy, and good governance. Mr. Bozhilov did a great job as chief of cabinet of a minister of defense. And so I think that he's one of the best possible speakers for the topic that we're discussing today. Dancho, you have the floor.
Благодаря, господин модератор. Ваши превъзходителства, уважаеми госпожи и господа, радвам се, че темата за сигурността присъства на този висок форум, защото ние на практика виждаме пряката връзка между тероризма и международните отношения, между тероризма и сигурността. Темата ще става още по-важна, имайки предвид многобройните рискове и предизвикателства пред сигурността и тенденцията към повишаване на общата несигурност в международен мащаб. В международен аспект наблюдаваме опит за препозициониране на различни фактори, глобални и регионални, и този процес ще продължи в обозримо бъдеще, поддържайки системата на международните отношения в динамика и в неравновесно състояние, допълнително допринасяйки към дефицитите в сигурността. Ето защо бизнесът и отговорните за политиките в сферата на туризма ще трябва да изведат въпросите на сигурността като един от приоритетите си. Трябва да се фокусираме преди всичко върху анализа на уязвимостите и да се предприемат превентивни мерки. Със сигурност ще е необходимо заделяне и на повече средства за сигурност в областта на туризма. Аз бих казал, че това би била една необходима инвестиция. От особено значение е добрата координация между държавата, държавните органи, бизнеса и браншовите организации. И аз мисля, че може да се мисли за установяване на различни формати на сътрудничество. Няма да се спирам на многобройните рискове и заплахи, пред които сме изправени. Бих искал да се спра много накратко на един феномен, който според мен ще има все по-важно значение за хората, за обществото и който е свързан с развитието на новите технологии. Освен възможностите за получаване на повече информация и знания, хората са поставени пред ново предизвикателство, а именно информацията за отделния човек да е много по-достъпна и отворена, както и много по-лесно да се достигне до всеки един индивид и до неговото лично информационно пространство. Това улеснява възможностите за външно влияние. Именно поради тези причини ние сме изправени пред предизвикателствата на дезинформацията, информационните войни и хибридните заплахи. Целенасочено генериране на информационни потоци с неточно или неистинско съдържание цели да повлияе по определен начин голям брой хора. Подобни информационни войни могат да имат силно негативно влияние върху държави, общества, бизнеси, включително и върху туристическия бизнес. Очакваме хибридните заплахи да се засилят в бъдеще. Ето защо приоритет трябва да бъде противодействието им и аз бих казал, че Европейския съюз вече взима мерки в насока противодействие на хибридните заплахи, но е необходимо повече, включително привличане на медии, неправителствени организации и всички, които биха могли да допринесат за неутрализирането на хибридните заплахи. Много накратко ще се спра и на проблемите на Балканите, тъй като Софийски форум за сигурност приоритетно се е фокусирал върху анализа на тенденциите в този регион, а и българското председателство извежда тяхната европейска перспектива като свой приоритет. Страните от Западните Балкани са изправени пред многобройни предизвикателства пред сигурността, повечето от които са свързани с глобални проблеми, като миграция, тероризъм, транснационална организирана престъпност, радикализация. Ето защо решението на тези проблеми трябва да се търси не на национална и регионална основа, а в рамките на един по-широк общоевропейски подход. По тази причина Софийски форум за сигурност излезе преди месеци повече с инициатива за включване в работните групи на Европейския съюз, тези, които нямат характер на орган, но имат по-скоро информационен и координационен характер, Западните Балкани да присъстват в тяхната работа и активно да участват в обмен на мнения, експертиза и информация. Това би било само допълнителен принос към общия подход на Европейския съюз. Бих казал, че ясната европейска перспектива, както и общата положителна динамика в сигурността, ни дават увереност да кажем, че от гледна точка на сигурността, Западните Балкани създават една добра, благоприятна среда за развитието на туризма и за един бъдещ стабилен регион. Благодаря за вниманието.
Thank you, Dancho. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Velina Čekarova. Velina Čekarova is a senior research fellow at the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Her field of research covers the global system transformation and the Black Sea area with regard to geopolitical and security-related issues with special focus on the EU policy towards the Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans. And as you know, the Western Balkans are among the big priorities for the Bulgarian presidency, and we're happy that the Bulgarian presidency will naturally be followed by the Austrian presidency, and Velina is a representative of an Austrian institution, which will give her the chance to follow up from Vienna for the next 6 months. Velina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, dear panelists, as a security expert, I would like to present you with an analysis on geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges, and we'll use the example of the Western Balkans, as it is one of the priorities of both the Bulgarian presidency and afterwards the following Austrian presidency. So when we, it works, perfect. Of course, it is linked to drivers, geopolitical and geoeconomic drivers that might be important and significant for the tourism sector. So it's basically an analysis that is very much oriented towards the specific field of interest. There are 4 specific levels of analysis that are important, and I would like to outline them very shortly, because I think that the hierarchy is very significant. Why? Because on the one side, the global system as a whole is in a process of a great transition. It is sufficient to name global economy, global trade, global energy, or even finance and monetary policy, if you like, as global networks that are right now undergoing processes of transformation. And these processes then, of course, affect also the field of tourism. So it's basically what I intend to do is basically a geopolitical due diligence that is, in my opinion, also important for the field of tourism. Why? The rift from global system transformation processes and structures in emergence, they are regional dynamics that then again, of course, affect Europe as a whole. And this, again, influence the emergence of new regional actors constellations. And there is one interesting level of analysis that Jordan already mentioned, which is the level of citizens empowering, which I also will shortly elaborate on. What could be the geopolitical drivers that are important with regards to the tourist flows? This might be on the one side, again, as seen from the level of system analysis, level of global system analysis. This might be on the one side the emergence of new global order, which is linked to the end of the unipolar era of American dominance, but also with regard to the emergence of new regional actors and group of actors such as BRICS or even countries in Asia and Africa. But it is also a stage that we are right now facing of increased global political instability, as well as an increased importance of regional supranational organizations. And this, again, is also linked to the greater importance of individuals, both individuals, but also corporations with global importance. And there are right now three important trends with regard to the global system that will affect Europe as a whole, and of course the decision making of the European member states. And it is linked, of course, on the one side with the very important question or issue of the stability of the current financial and monetary system. Right now, Europe is recovering for the very first time from the last recession in 2007, but it is still not clear whether this cycle will last for a longer period. Then again, it is probably the global order is entering a new phase of system bipolarity or multipolarity, where the United States will be facing new regional or even system competitors such as China and Russia. And then there is the issue of the nuclearization of North Korea, which might result even in a unilateral preemptive strike by the United States. These are systemic issues that will affect the question of security and safety of Europe as a whole. Then we move to the regional dynamics and their impact on Europe. And of course, there are some trends and processes that needs our attention, such as the new French-German cooperation with regard to the Merkel-Macron bond, or even, if you like, the polarization within the European Union with regard to the important questions of the support for US or anti-Russian policies, where we know exactly that these are sensitive issues where there are certain dividing lines among the member states. But there are also dividing lines that should not be ignored between the so-called old and new Europe in terms of different speeds, regions, or even circles of influence. And last but not least, when we talk about the direct neighborhood to the south and to the east, I would like to point out this so-called ring of fire that was termed by the former Swedish foreign minister as opposed to the ring of stability and safety that is actually one of the greatest objectives of the European Union policy towards these neighborhoods. And if you see on the map, there are two specific regions when it comes to security and safety. The one is internal, so to say, and this is the region of the Western Balkans, and the other one, which is in this light yellow color, is the so-called Eastern Partnership. The first region is placed within the European enlargement policy, and the second one within the European neighborhood policy. So going to the level of regional actors, constellations, I would like to outline shortly by using the example of the Western Balkans that there is indeed certain strengthening of the positions of European Union institutions, and if we look at the statements from significant institutions with regard to the Western Balkans, there are certain signals that needs our attention. One of them is the statement by Mogherini claiming that the Western Balkans are part of Europe, as we share the same history and the same geography. Back to the question about geopolitical and geo-economic importance. Then the rift from the statement of Commissioner Hahn, he claimed that from a European perspective, it is important to understand either we export stability or we would import instability. And even in the new paper of the European Commission, the key word geostrategic was used in the sentence, the Western Balkans have a future as a geostrategic investment in a stable, strong, and united Europe. So it's actually something that now we can claim it has a geostrategic importance for the European Union as a whole. What is the concrete importance for the tourism? It is, of course, linked to the increased connectivity that will boost tourism as well. To use the same paper by the European Commission, the newly published one, the Western Balkans are surrounded geographically by the European Union member states, and it is a political priority to connect infrastructure also between the European Union and the Western Balkans, and to accelerate the developments of interconnectedness. So I think the key word is surely interconnectedness. I don't need to elaborate on the path of accession. So far, there are two key frontrunners in terms of the European Union accession process in the Western Balkans, which are now facing even a specific framework of accession that is set for the 2025. And yes, indeed, the European Union can be named as a geo-economic actor in the Western Balkans. It is by far the biggest investor in this region, and it is also the largest trading partner. And lastly, it is about citizens empowering. When it comes to tourism, we should also regard the influence of the fourth industrial revolution. Why? Because it is now absolutely clear that the question of safety and security is a key factor in the majority of consumers' travel decisions. However, there are disruptive innovations and technologies. There are new tools emerging that are influencing directly this sector. From new apps, from new modes, if you like, of sharing. And this is already a reality that needs to be addressed. And maybe even the social added value, if you like. We are living in times where the question of climate change and global warming is being put on each panel, even on the panels of about security. And of course, social added value of tourism through these so-called disruptive technologies will be certainly an issue. It was already stated in the first panel, and I don't need to elaborate on this. I just wanted to present you with short statistics about how terrorism and safety, when traveling to a country and when traveling inside the country, are actually shaping decisions of tourists to go to a specific destination. This according to a recent study from 2017. So these are significant findings. So we can agree that safety and security, and specifically the topic of terrorism, are part of the geopolitical and geoeconomic package that is also called due diligence, and it's something that the tourism business and institutions and agencies need to address. So basically, if you look at these statistics from the same study, and I have all the information from this presentation, so it is available for each one of you, is something that is actually affecting, so level of fearfulness is something that is affecting decisions. I would like to end my presentation with a short quote by myself, which is that the greatest geopolitical challenge, in this particular case, safety and security and stability, if adequately addressed, and the holistic approach was already named by the other panelists, and it must be a connected approach, so if adequately addressed, can become also our greatest geopolitical asset in the future. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Velina. We thank you. We just heard two complementary Bulgarian viewpoints, one of Yordan Buzilov in Sofia and one of Velina Chekarova in Vienna. Both agree that security is top priority for tourism. And now, next on my list is Tom Jenkins. Tom Jenkins is the Executive Director of the European Tour Operators Associations, ETOA, which represents tour operators and their suppliers at European level. It promotes greater awareness of the benefits provided by the group travel industry and influences European tourism policy and legislation. Under Tom's stewardship, ETOA's scope of activities have broadened considerably, and the association now represents the interests of 8 million inbound tourists. Tom is a tourist expert, often called upon a variety of media, including GMTV, BBC TV, CNN, CNBC, Radius 4 and 5. So I believe that his appearance today with us will make our meeting much more attractive to the general public as well. Tom, you have the floor.
That was a profoundly embarrassing introduction. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle from your previous distinguished panelists. I come from very much a background of selling Europe as a destination to the long-haul origin markets of America and Asia. And we've endured, as an industry, some significant, really damaging shortfalls in demand as a result of terrorist activity. I date from the time when, in 1986, we saw a shortfall of about 30% in long-haul bookings from North America as a result of a series of scares. And we saw something similar occur in 1991 and to a lesser extent in 2001. So we've got a long background of witnessing the really pointless damage this subject causes. I think we should start with 4 bits of really good news. Firstly, the threat of terrorism is almost non-existent to a client traveling in Europe. A visitor is far more likely to be damaged by a domesticated animal than they are by a tourist. And the risks posed by traffic and winter sports or whitewater canoeing dwarf those of terrorism. And if governments were really worried about the welfare of visitors, they'd be launching public information campaigns on how to cross the road correctly, but they're not. But anyway, good news is that it's an almost non-existent threat to individuals. Secondly, it's a declining phenomenon. Terrorism was a genuinely deadly activity in comparison in the 70s and 80s. We've seen a dramatic shortfall in terrorist activity in Western Europe, mainly due to the decline of active activity by the leading nationalist terrorist organizations in Spain and the United Kingdom. But definitely terrorism is on the wane in Europe. Furthermore, I think when you look at how people react to terrorism, it's also less significant. The thing to remember about 1986 is that during 1986, nothing happened. There was a bombing by American jets of Libya in 1986, taking off from UK Air Force bases. But no, well, with one possible exception, no American was harmed in 86, and yet we saw a massive collapse in demand. Now we're seeing real events take place, and we're seeing a very, very slight dip in visitor numbers from the leading origin markets. So, and these can be measured in weeks, not months. Secondly, fourthly, the other good news is it's no longer a massive pan-European activity. In the old days, if there was a strike in London, you could see bookings for Rome collapse. If there was an incident in Germany, bookings for Spain would go down from North America and from Asia. And so their reaction is more sophisticated and localized. It's still significant. I'm not saying for one moment what happened in Paris was good for Chinese bookings for my members, but it's nothing like as significant as we would have expected it to be. But it's still real. What we experienced in Paris 2 years ago and in Brussels 2 years ago caused real loss of economic activity, and you cannot replace unsold hotel rooms. They've gone. They're like rotting strawberries. You've lost it. What's interesting about those incidents is that it wasn't just the Chinese and the Japanese thinking, these are not places to go to. What made it really complex is that the impact was domestic as well. If you look at the shortfalls inside Paris, it's not my specialist area, and inside London, what you saw was a mass cancellation of local school groups who would normally go to the centre of town and book there. So it's not a question of unfamiliarity or distance, giving a kind of ignorant impulse. It's also familiarity causing panic. Now, I would just stress that what we're looking at is inherently irrational. And alas, the worst offenders in the irrationality game are governments. Their immediate reaction to a terrorist event is inevitably to close the barn door after the horse has bolted. They will react by crowding the area where the incident has taken place with troops, and that's perhaps not the last thing they should be doing, but it's certainly not the first thing they should be doing. And they invariably react according to their ability to react, not to the threat. I don't want to go on too long about this, but it's noticeable that the worst atrocities in Europe have occurred in metropolitan transit systems. These are inherently impossible to protect. So what they do is divert attention to placing barriers on sidewalks, on bridges, for example. These can be done, and the risk is nugatory. In such an environment, it's very dangerous where governments are acting irrationally and clients are acting irrationally for anyone to put forward any recommendations, but I will do so. I think the thing that we have to do is understand that, number one, terrorism is a messaging system. They're trying to convey information. And it's really important that if such a terrible event occurs, that we all take control of the narrative. Not just governments, who sometimes cannot be relied upon to take control of the narrative, but certainly we always try both to supply information where information is available, but emphasize normality. Whatever you do, do not station armored personnel carriers in front of photogenic tourist attractions. This is the worst message to convey. I would also desperately warn everyone to having experts fear-bombing you for both financial and government spending reward. I do not mean the distinguished people on my right here, but there's an entire industry evolving on a local level of people who are trying to make money out of fear. And this is, I think we've got a moral responsibility to counteract that in the same way that we have an overwhelming moral responsibility to minimize, accurately minimize, the threat that these people pose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. You're trying to sell Europe to China, which might be much more profitable exercise than to sell Europe to Europe. Indeed, I very much agree that it's much more important to teach the children how to cross the road correctly. And tourism as politics, as most of other human activities, are subject to psychology and not subject to logic and rational, unfortunately. I can't agree more. And The last on my list is our next speaker, Lechizar Todorov. He became the CEO of TerraTour Service Limited in 2002. Previously was with Carlson Wagon Lee Travel for more than 10 years. TerraTour Service is part of AgroHold Holding Group. The company concentrates the interest of the group in investment, constructions, and asset management of real estate and hospitality in Bulgaria. You have the floor, Lechizar.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be part of the panel in this discussion, in this conference. I would like to bring yet another perspective to the issue of tourism and security on a very practical level. As was said before, TerraTour is concentrating in investment in hotel business, and what I would like to share with you is the practical implications of the security threats on a very corporate level. Previous panelists have addressed different sorts of threats. Unfortunately, security has other aspects too. And I would like to point out, apart from terrorism, I would like to point out something as usual and as everyday happening in life, which is the petty crime. This is a phenomenon which very often plays an even more important role in the decision-making of the tourists when they have to decide whether they go to Paris or whether they come to Sunny Beach, for example, in Bulgaria. Other aspects can be also such usual and common things as the supply chain. So if something goes wrong with our supplies and all of a sudden the hotel industry runs out of water or electricity due to a natural disaster or due to an act of terrorism, that can be a very serious security threat. I would say that in the last years, the industry, the hospitality industry, is becoming more and more aware of the seriousness of the threat, and there are a number of measures which have been taken in order to address it. I started doing what I do nowadays 15 years ago, and we were not as conscious as we are nowadays. To give you a very practical example, nowadays the security risk assessment is part of the design process of a future investment and of a future hotel. So we sit down with security specialists and try to analyze what the security threats could be in the specific area, and this could influence the decision of whether you put bulletproof glasses, for example, or you put concrete blocks on the road in order to stop unwanted traffic, or you just resort to the simpler measures of having sophisticated CCTV and access control on the lifts. By any case, this is an important measure, and I believe that commonly the industry nowadays in Bulgaria, and I believe everywhere, pays more and more attention to the security training of the staff. We employ on a day-to-day basis and across the board, we employ security specialists for the different areas, for the different resorts, but also for the single hotels. How and what is the future and what can we do about it, except from the geopolitical risks and drives that were previously so well described to us. I would say the best and the practical solution which we can use on a day-to-day level, again, is working together with the authorities, working together with the national authorities, working together with the police, working together with the municipal authorities, working together with the consular sections of the different countries who send most tourists to our resorts and destinations. Working together with the other stakeholders in the tourism industry, so that in the different form of organizations and NGOs, so that we can together develop and establish our contingency plans of how to handle a potential crisis, and even better of how to prevent it. I believe Bulgaria has some very good examples in this respect of the concerted efforts which were introduced on the Black Sea coast, especially in the last summer, of having the joint patrols of security and police, of also doing preventive work in order to help address the issue. By this, I will conclude my statement, and I hope that there will be questions which can be answered.
Thank you very much, Lechazar. Thank you very much. Very practical viewpoint. And now we can open the floor for discussion. You have... I do not see many hands raised, but I have a question which I want very much to listen to the expert opinion of our panelists. Which do you think or you believe is the safest tourist destination in Europe or worldwide?
I don't know whether it is the safest, but it is a very safe one, and it's where we are, all of us, today. We've done a lot of efforts to do it, and Bulgaria is a very stable, politically, socially, country in Europe, and I believe that we are attracting more and more tourists every year.
There was a genius chess player, Alekhine, and when there was a survey among the chess players, everybody was asked who is the best chess player, and everybody pointed himself, he himself for the best. And who is the second best player? Everybody said Alekhine. So I would ask which is the second best world tourist destination. This would be my second question. Michael.
Well, I will not answer to this question, but I have a remark to make. I was being, how can I say, hearing very closely on what has been said and thinking also. And I believe that apart from the very analytical presentations that we all made about risks and threats and so on, we are missing the point, actually. And the point is that the biggest threats, not only for tourism, and not only for tourism in Europe, but worldwide, is first of all the lack of visionary leadership. We have no visionary leaders to lead us to a situation where tourism, among other things, will flourish. Second, we have an increasing dose of hypocrisy and double talk in the dialogue among nations and states. We are using double standards, and this is perhaps very closely connected with the rising populism and nationalism that we see everywhere around the world. And the third big risk for me is the ever-growing difference between the ever-dwindling number of the few haves and the ever-growing, overwhelming number of have-nots. We should be looking to the issues directly and name them by their actual name. I hope that this will open up a discussion among participants, because I believe that these are the real issues of our world today, and of course tourism included. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jordan. And Tom.
Yep. I would say that risks and threats are objective. We want them, we like them or not, they do exist. And I would say that the safe place is where we have good analysis, good prognosis, good preventive measures, and of course, clever decisions.
Tom.
I think your idea of a safe tourist destination is a kind of notional one. And I can tell you what a safe tourist destination looks like. It's a tourism destination with no bikes, no water sports, no winter sports, no cars, no animals, no hospitals, surprisingly dangerous hospitals. Such a place may exist, but it wouldn't be much fun to go on holiday.
With your permission, I'll contradict you, describing Antarctica as such a place, and I had the opportunity to visit it several times.
Actually, that would have been my tip for the safest, the safest tourist destination. also without risking to offend anybody attending this, this conference. I would like to join Jordan's statement, as I'm on the part of security and geopolitical analysis, and I think it's also very much linked to the previous statement about the lack of leadership and the double talk. I think that if we are to manage an objective analysis of our state of things, we can also build a vision on where we would like to be. So if I ask the question, where actually do we like to be in 5 or 10 years, and we do a questionnaire here right now in this room, we will be quite surprised about the results. So basically, that's the reason why we can address both issues of the lack of leadership and the double talk. Just stick to the objective analysis, and that's why I think that geopolitical and geoeconomic issues will be also unfortunately popping up as there are so many analysts dealing with these issues, and due to interconnectivity, tourism will be also one of the fields that will be affected by the emergence of these issues.
Thank you, Velina. We started with only 10 minutes late, and we shall finish only 6 minutes late, so we are very good with keeping the time. Michael Christidis, Jordan Bozhilov, Velina Chakarova, Tom Jenkins, Lachizar Todorov, thank you very much for the great panel. Thank you.
So we deserve our coffee, huh?
Do we have coffee break?
Аз наистина исках да кажа,